What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. The NCAA women's volleyball season is approaching its climax, but that doesn't mean we have stopped the upsets that have been going on, such as number 10 Purdue toppling Ohio State not once, but twice. How about those Boilermakers? They finally pulled off the big upset that they've been looking for. And how about San Diego? The struggling San Diego Toreros are able to top Pepperdine in a crucial matchup in the West Coast Conference. And how about this upset? How about Rice, unranked Rice, the Owls of Rice, taking down number 2 Texas in a 5-set thriller in the Longhorns Gymnasium? How did they do it, and what went wrong for the Longhorns? Also, we have a lot of conference tournaments that have been going on and conference tournaments that have passed. Which teams have punched their ticket into the NCAA Tournament? And how about Kentucky punching their tickets into the NCAA Tournament, winning the SEC? No surprise, but they did so last weekend. All that and more here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Yes, unfortunately, I have to be on the afternoon of Monday this week, considering later on tonight I have a live call or a broadcast on Wellington Sports Radio. I'll be broadcasting the Oregon State and Houston game that's going to be going live at 4:15 because it is Elite 8 action, and tomorrow doesn't work out for me in terms of Set Point and in terms of broadcast, so unfortunately I have to do Set Point today. Otherwise I'll have to skip it, but we are not skipping it because we got to keep this train going, baby. We are not stopping, no doubt. We have been on here for 1 year straight. We have not had a week off since March 2nd, 2020. It's been that long, ladies and gentlemen, volleyball fans of all ages. So without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first, we actually have a word from our sponsor. Our first sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Legacy Financial. 2020 was a tough year. However, staying positive, keeping your faith, and continuing to work hard is the goal. If you're ever in a financial struggle at the moment, you're doing well and you want to get to the next level, or you are looking for a new opportunity to work for yourself and earn more money part-time, give AO a call at 510-928-2104. And that number again is 510-928-2104 to book your appointment today. AO and her husband Andrew are just two people on a mission to help families build a legacy, because every family and everyone needs a legacy. You can follow them on Twitter at legacy_uncut, and you can also follow them on Instagram at sims_uncut. The second sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Mom is Always Right Media. Are you feeling overwhelmed with schoolwork? Are those essays keeping you up at night? Don't lose sleep. Just pick up the phone. Mom is Always Right Writing Agency will give you quality essays, and they will always make their deadlines. Sleep soundly knowing that they are on the job. For more information, call 626-653-3649. That number again is 626-653-3649. Because for all you college students out there that are on spring break, this might come in handy. And while you're at it, definitely check out Mama's Always Right Media's podcasts, such as It Goes Down in the PM. Make sure you check out the newest episode of It Goes Down in the PM, brought to you by Mama's Always Right Media. And then the second podcast for Mama's Always Right Media is Coffee After Dark. Don't miss the next juicy chapter of your favorite love story. Check out Season 2 of Coffee After Dark, brought to you by Mama's Always Right Media, where they will help you open your business from start to finish. And then the final sponsor for IE Sports Radio is the Sports Rundown. Are you a sports fan but have too much going on in your life these days to keep up with the 24/7 news cycle? Or maybe you are new to sports and you want to understand the nuances better. Either way, the Sports Rundown is for you. They are a new podcast that gives you basic, professional, and collegiate sports news, stats, tidbits, and fun facts by the time you get to work, start that second cup of coffee, or finish walking the dog. Enough information to make you rich with knowledge involving sports while talking about current sporting events. And they will teach you something fun along the way, such as mascots, uniforms, history, feel-good stories, and even sports rules. And to all the soccer buffs out there, they even cover the Premier League. New episodes drop Monday and Friday mornings, so definitely give them a listen. Thank you to all three of our sponsors for being the official sponsors of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Now let's get on into the volleyball upset magic that happened last weekend. So there weren't too many last weekend, cannot compare to last week and the week before, but we have a lot of noteworthy matchups and noteworthy upsets to make note of. We'll start with the big one, the first upset, which was Rice versus number 2 Texas. So I forgot this matchup even happened until I just completed set point last week, because I think last week I did my show on Tuesday afternoon as opposed to Monday, late Monday evening. So unfortunately I had to do it that way, and then when I saw that matchup going on, I was like, oh shoot, that's my bad. Whoops. So this matchup started like every other Texas matchup. Texas just dominating to start the match. And Texas won the first set 25-10. It was that one-sided for the Owls, or against the Owls. And honestly, Texas never trailed. There was only one tie, and that was it. Texas showed why Rice is not ranked, and Texas is ranked. But then the second set was quite the opposite. Well, quite the opposite for Texas, but it was actually more of the same, because Rice actually won the second set, but they never trailed, and they wound up rolling through that second set 25-16. I was very surprised to see Texas lose that set by that amount. And then the third set was the tightest set of the match, as there were 11 ties and 4 lead changes, and it was back and forth action. But Rice was able to squeak out the third set victory, winning 25-23. Then I started to perk and see, oh my, this might actually be another upset. Because for those that don't know, Rice actually beat Texas last year. If I remember correctly, the match was at Rice, and Rice was up 2-0 in the match, and then Texas wound up winning the next 2 sets, and then Rice wound up pulling the upset, which everyone was laughing at Texas. Hey. Okay, maybe not laughing, but I digress. Okay, so set 4, Texas just thrashed him. Texas thrashed the living you-know-what out of Rice. Surprisingly enough, there were 5 ties and 2 lead changes, but Texas steamrolled Rice in one set 4, 25-14. Now, set 5 was also pretty tight. It wasn't as tight as set 3, but there were 8 ties and 5 lead changes. Rice actually took the lead in the second part of the 5th set, and it looked as if they were going to pull out the upset just like last year. Then Texas was doing all that it can to stay alive, but Texas just fell short as Rice got the final point of the match and knocked off number 2 Texas in the 5th set, 15-13, pulling off the biggest upset of this season. I want to say that's the biggest upset entirely, considering Texas was heavily favored in this match. I don't understand how Texas continues to lose to Rice. Is Rice just that good? Or is Rice just their kryptonite? Another thing I want to say about Texas against Rice was that I feel Texas might have looked ahead to Baylor, because I think Rice was the biggest trap game for Texas, considering Texas played Baylor. I think they played them on Friday, I want to say. Either way, Rice came right before Baylor, and I really think Texas looked too far ahead, which can happen sometimes. Like, Rice was the perfect trap game for Texas, and then boom, Texas wound up losing. They didn't focus on Rice. They just focused ahead on Baylor because they were eager to take on their rivals for the 4th time this season. But then they forgot all about Rice, which was disappointing. But kudos to Rice, though. Like, that's a big win for them. So, Rice was led by Nicole Lennon, who had 18 kills. She hit 214 because she also had 9 hitting errors. Anoda, I think that's how her name is pronounced. Anoda Edukine had 12 kills. She only had 1 hitting error for a hitting percentage of .579. That's pretty darn good. And then their next kill leader was Saara Maruska, who had 6 kills, 4 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 100. They only had 50 kills as a team, and 3/5 of them went to Lennon and Adukine. In terms of assists, Carly Graham had 32 assists, while Rice had 5 service aces and 5 service errors, which is pretty balanced ratio. In terms of blocks, Rice as a team had 9 blocks. They had 14 block assists and 2 solo stuffs. And then here's where Rice really excelled. Rice had 64 digs. 14 of them went to Lennon. 13 of them went to Maruska. And then 12 went to Graham and Elizabeth LeBleu. And as a team, Rice only hit 206, which that really surprises me. How does Rice hit 206 and then they still beat Texas? And they only had 5 service aces. But maybe Rice was serving great all game, and they were really disrupting Texas's serve receive. I don't know. But anyway, now going over to Texas, they were led by Logan Eggleston, who had 21 kills. She had 9 hitting errors, but hit 286, which is pretty good, despite having the 9 hitting errors. Melanie Parra had 13 kills, only 3 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .323. And Breon Butler had 9 kills, 2 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .292. Then also got to throw out that Asia O'Neal had 8 kills, 2 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .300. Janet Gabriel had 43 assists, while in terms of service aces and service errors, Texas had 13 service aces, but also had 13 service errors. So they really excelled in terms... They were pretty much hit or miss when it came to serve receive. I don't know if the service errors really caught up to them in set 5, but I don't know. Maybe, or set 3, because set 3 was also pretty tight as well, but I don't know. I don't think that alone was the game. In terms of blocks, Texas had 10 blocks as a team. 2 of them were solo stuffs, courtesy of Breon Butler, and then 16 of them were block assists. Breon Butler surprisingly had 7 block assists, which was pretty outstanding. Now here's where Texas struggled. They struggled in the dig department. They only had 48 digs. Keep in mind, Rice had 64. Rice had 4 players in double digits in terms of digs. Texas only had 1 player in double digits in terms of digs, and that player was Nalani Iosia, who had 13 digs. Jenna Gabriel had 9 digs, Sydney Peterson had 8 digs, and Melanie Parra had 7 digs. Now, as a team, Texas hit 281, which, again, makes me wonder, how did they hit 281 compared to Rice's 206 and then find a way to lose? It's like, I don't know, man, like, what... I really don't understand. It's like, what are you thinking, Texas? It's like, is Texas just that bad against Rice? Like, I don't know, man. And then after the game, oh baby, where was it? The comment section. Surprisingly, the comment section was pretty funny. I'm not one to do this whole sort of thing, but where is it? They didn't. Here it is. Okay, so Texas dropped their first match of the season, and then Twitter Texas Twitter had the biggest field day ever. So apparently there was a problem with having Nalani Iosia as libero. Someone said, why isn't Morgan O'Brien the libero? And then someone also said Jarrett, I guess that's the coach's name, needs to make better decisions. And then he also said that this person also said that he needs to switch servers. And also, now this was the big thing about the loss. So I'm not disappointed that Texas lost, but I'm disappointed on how they lost. So Texas surprisingly was up 13-9 in set. Or I'm sorry, 12-9 in set 5, and then they gave up a 6-1 run. And I'm just thinking, how do you give up a 6-1 run? A 6-1 run? Is this San Diego versus LMU again? It's like Texas is the number 2 team in the nation, and then they gave up a 6-1 run at the end. It's like, I don't get it anymore. It's like, I don't know what to think of Texas after this match. But Rice is pretty good. Like, Rice is having a pretty solid season. They do have 2 losses to SMU, 1 loss to Houston, and then 1 loss to Baylor, which coincidentally, I think they played that match. Yeah, they did play that match prior to the matchup against Texas. So I think Rice is a little underrated. Like, if they're going 5 with Baylor and almost winning, and then they managed to beat Texas at Texas, mind you, in 5 sets, I think Rice is a little under the radar. And also, you got to make note that although this isn't really groundbreaking, Texas is 12-0 in the Conference USA, and I think they're the number 1 seed. And it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Rice won the Conference USA tournament. And after that win over Texas, I think maybe Rice could, hence the word could, be a possible at-large team. Like, even if Rice somehow doesn't win the Conference USA tournament, I think Rice can get in, especially with the results against Baylor and Texas. It's pretty amazing. And then now back to Texas Twitter after the loss. People were saying it's all coach's fault, and then more people were saying use a good libero, and then people are still blaming the coach, and then they're still saying the entire replies to the Texas Twitter account basically featured it's all coach's fault or the libero should have been switched. I see no problem with Nalani Iosia. Like, it's not her fault that she couldn't dig everything. Like, she's only one person. Like, Texas as a whole had 48 digs. Everyone else needs to step up as well. Like, it's not on one player. It's not on the head coach. Everyone needs to step up. And every bit of Texas Twitter needs to be quiet. Like, I'm sorry, but you can't just point the finger at one player or one person or one coach or anything like that. Like, and also, it's better to lose now than to lose in the NCAA tournament. And I guess Rice was that trap game. I really think Rice was the greatest trap game for Texas, and I think Texas might have looked too far ahead to Baylor. It always happens to, like, some of the best teams. Like, whether it's professional sports or college sports, it always happens when it comes to, like, certain teams looking ahead. So I don't think people can blame Texas too much, but Rice, this just goes to show you that Rice is pretty good. And Rice could be a possible surprise in the NCAA tournament. Like, if there's one team no Big Ten team wants to see, it's Rice. So we'll see. We'll have to see after their Conference USA tournament. But I could tell Texas Twitter, or every Texas fan, that Texas beat Baylor this past weekend, and it's all good in the hood. They beat Texas at Baylor, mind you. So I think that was Baylor's first home loss of the season. So that's good for Texas. They're back on track. I think Texas can still make some noise in the NCAA tournament. They've got a bunch of talent on their team. It's just that they can't afford to look ahead to anything. I think looking ahead was their biggest mistake that they made. So there's that. All right, now I don't consider this an upset because this series featured two talented teams that were ranked in the top 10, but Purdue pulling off not one but two wins over Ohio State is quite amazing, especially since Ohio State has had such a phenomenal year, and no team has had an answer for Ohio State at Ohio State. So the first set between Ohio State and Purdue, Ohio State won that first set 25-20. Quite the tight set as there were 9 ties and 6 lead changes, but the second set Purdue won in pretty tight fashion, winning that second set 25-22, 6 ties and 2 lead changes in set 2. And then set 3, there were 9 ties and 2 lead changes, but Purdue took that third set 25-22. And then set 4, surprisingly, Purdue never trailed, but this set was also pretty tight as well, as there were 3 ties and 0 lead changes, and Purdue won the fourth set 25-22, winning the match and scoring an upset over Ohio State. So how did Purdue do it? They were led by Grace Cleveland, who had 17 kills, only 4 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .289. Caitlin Newton had 13 kills, but only had a hitting percentage of .146. And Maddie Chin had 10 kills and hitting percentage of .222. Haley Bush had 3 kills, and she led the offense with 49 assists. Purdue only had 3 service aces and 4 service errors, which isn't bad. And then in terms of blocks, Purdue had 12.5 blocks. 25 of them were all block assists, which is quite amazing. To have 12 team blocks as a whole, and then 25 block assists is quite astounding. That's pretty much where their defense shined. Purdue also had 71 digs. 22 of them went to Jenna Otek, and 11 of them went to Bush, Newton, and Cleveland. And as a team, Purdue hit .233. As for Ohio State, they were led by Emily Landot, who had 23 kills, while Vanja Bukalic had 16 kills. Bukalic hit .306, and Riley Rader had 8 kills, 1 hitting error, and a hitting percentage of .368, sorry. Mac Pedraza had 49 assists, while Kylie Murr had 6 assists. Now, surprisingly, Ohio State had only 2 service aces. That's pretty much kind of what they struggled in. That wasn't groundbreaking, but I think that's kind of where Ohio State would like to excel in a lot better. Ohio State also missed 6 serves, by the way. Now, also, Ohio State also kind of struggled in blocks, as they only had 7 blocks as a team. They had 2 solo stuffs and 10 block assists. But this is where, now this stat, Ohio State excelled in, as they had 84 digs. 25 of them went to Kylie Murr, 17 of them went to Landot, 14 of them went to Gabby Gonzalez, and then 11 of them went to Hannah Grunsfelder. So I don't think defense was too much of an issue outside of blocks, but I think the offense kind of needed to do better and be aware of Purdue's block. As a team, Ohio State hit .224, which wasn't bad. It's they were hitting in the high 190s and the 200s to 250s. Set 4 was actually their best set, but unfortunately they kind of tumbled in that set. Purdue, on the other hand, shook off a bad first set as they only hit 83, but hit 308 in set 2, 240 in set 3, and then 277 in set 4. So that's how Purdue beat Ohio State the first time. The second time was kind of almost the same thing. So Ohio State took the first set 25-20. There were 10 ties and 4 lead changes. There are a lot of ties in this match, as Purdue actually took the second set in close fashion, 26-24. There were 12 ties and 3 lead changes, and I think that's a set where Ohio State wants to have back, because when you're losing in a deuce game, that's when you know you messed up. And then in set 3, there were 10 ties and 4 lead changes, but Purdue hit Purdue won the third set 25-21. And then in set 4, Purdue ran away with that set as there were only 2 ties and there were 0 lead changes as Purdue won that fourth set 25-18 and beat Ohio State for the second time. So this time, Purdue's offense was really clicking as Caitlin Newton led the team with 14 kills, but she had 10 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 65. Luckily for her, Purdue was able to step up as a whole offensively as Grace Cleveland had 12 kills, only 1 hitting error for a hitting percentage of 275. Emma Ellis also stepped up and had 11 kills, 3 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 333. Taylor Trammell chipped in 10 kills, 1 hitting error, and 19 attempts for a hitting percentage of 474. And then Jael Johnson, I think that's the freshman middle blocker, had 9 kills, 4 hitting errors, and a hitting percentage of 238. If she had gotten into double digits, that would have been pretty darn impressive, having 5 players in double digits in terms of kills. That's when you know Purdue's offense is clicking. Haley Bush had 50 assists, and she also chipped in 2 kills. Once again, Purdue only had 2 service aces, and then they missed 7 serves, which isn't all that great, but that's not what they really struggled in. I mean, that's probably the biggest flaw of their game. That was probably the biggest thing that hurt them, but it didn't hurt them that much. Now, in terms of blocks, once again, Purdue excelled in this category as they had 14 blocks as a team. They had 1 solo block, and this time they had 22 block assists. Grace Cleveland had 9 block assists, which translates to her having a block, which is pretty darn impressive. Then Taylor Trammell had 7 block assists, which gives her a block. Purdue did better in terms of digs they didn't do better in the match, but they did better in this match than they did in the previous match in terms of digs, as they had 85 digs. 29 of them went to Jenna Otek. Marissa Hornung had 15 digs, and Haley Bush had 11, while Newton had 9, and then 7 digs went to Cleveland and Madison Schermerhorn. As a team, Purdue only hit 217, which is kind of surprising. They had no set that they hit over 300. Their best set came in set 2 where they hit 293. If they don't hit 293, I think that match goes 5, or it's a different outcome. Either way, Purdue was able to clinch the win. As for Ohio State, they were led by Emily Landot, who had 21 kills, but she had 12 hitting errors on 63 attempts for a hitting percentage of 143. That's not going to get the job done. If you're going to have 12 hitting errors and 63 attempts, that's not going to help you, considering Purdue pretty much saw that coming from a mile away. Riley Rader had 10 kills, 1 hitting error, 28 attempts for a hitting percentage of 321, and Lauren Witt had 9 kills, 2 hitting errors, and a hitting percentage of 467. Mac Pedraza had 49 assists, while in terms of service errors and service aces, Ohio State had 4 apiece in those departments. In terms of blocks, Ohio State had 8 blocks as a team, and then they had 16 block assists, which translates into 8 blocks as a team. And then in terms of digs, they had 88 digs. 25 of them went to Kylie Murr, 22 of them went to Hannah Grunsfelder, 14 of them went to Gabby Gonzalez, and 10 of them went to Landon. And then 9 of them also went to Pedraza. Now, this was what really, really did not surprise me on how Ohio State lost. Ohio State only hit 145. When you're holding Ohio State to under 200, or matter of fact, anything under 150, that's when your defense as a whole is doing great things. Purdue really shut down Ohio State in that match, as Purdue earned its biggest victories of the season. I'm not surprised that Purdue won that in such dominating fashion, just because Purdue has been battle-tested. They've been tested against Wisconsin, Minnesota, Penn State, Michigan, although Michigan is a little iffy when it comes to being ranked. And then Ohio State was the best chance for them to pull off a big win, and sure enough, Purdue did. As we say hello to Adam Karnick in the chat room, thank you for joining me, buddy, as we're actually talking some Big Ten volleyball as we speak. So yeah, Ohio State has a lot to learn, and I think that this was Purdue's best chance to get I think Purdue really improved its chances of possibly getting a top 16 seed. Because there's only 48 spots. 30 of them are automatic qualifiers, and then 18 of them are at-large spots, which everyone and their mothers are complaining about how the tournament format should be 64, the traditional 64, considering Kelly Sheffield, the Wisconsin coach, was saying, even said on Twitter, I'm looking at the NCAA men's basketball tournament, and I'm seeing that there's 64 spots in that tournament, when our tournament only has 48 spots. I'm paraphrasing, by the way, so it's not exactly what he said, but he pretty much said that he wants the women's volleyball tournament to have 64 teams, just like the men's and women's basketball tournament. But then you also have to factor in like airfare and everything along those lines, and maybe a bubble, because I believe they're having the entire tournament at one site. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that Omaha is going to be the host of the NCAA championship. But I don't think they're having the bubble. It all depends on what's happening, because we're still in a pandemic, and the top 16 seeds will most likely get at least one home game in their regional play. So there's that. So we'll be getting more into that as the NCAA bracket comes out, or pretty much after this weekend. So as for Purdue, they really earned this series sweep, and then they also earned those victories over Ohio State. And then Adam says Peyton Manning's favorite city. Yep, Omaha. Speaking of Omaha and the Summit League, now those are pretty much all the upsets that happened. Let's get into some volleyball noteworthy news that happened last weekend. So last weekend, the series matchup between Wisconsin and Penn State got canceled. Yes, it got canceled instead of postponed because of the abundance of the COVID policy or something along those lines. And I'm just going to pull up the official the official release of this of what happened, of the cancellation, if this thing wants to load. But I'm honestly surprised, but with how the season is pretty much reaching its climax, they're not going to be able to make up those games. Yeah, it says, this weekend's Wisconsin at Penn State volleyball series has been canceled. The decision was mutually agreed upon the two schools out of abundance of caution surrounding the health and safety of the participants. The events have been canceled due to health and safety concerns related to COVID-19 on the Penn State squad. The Badgers are scheduled to wrap up their regular season this week against Michigan. Okay, so what this means is that they're not going to be able to make up that series. But this also makes me wonder, are they going to make up some of the other series that was missed? Are they going to make up the series against Nebraska? Is Ohio State going to make up their series against Minnesota? And the list goes on and on of other matches that were missed as well. So this kind of makes me wish that Wisconsin had been able to play another Big Ten opponent, or another opponent in general. Like, for example, I forget who else was canceled. I kind of wanted to see Arizona, but I don't know. I don't think Arizona would have been up for the challenge. I don't think they would have wanted to trek up to Wisconsin and vice versa. Plus, another matchup I would have liked to see would probably be Utah versus Wisconsin, because the thing about Utah's series matchup against Washington State, the first matchup got canceled because Washington State was still in quarantine because of a little COVID outbreak within their program, because last weekend's matchup between Washington and Washington State got canceled. So there was that right there, and it kind of makes me wonder why Utah was unable to face Wisconsin. Maybe because of like travel issues or possible not wanting to get COVID. It also could have had something to do with the second matchup between Washington State and Utah. Now, the second matchup between Washington State and Utah was still on, and Utah was able to play that matchup against the Cougars, and then the Utes were able to win that matchup in 3 sets. So that's cool right there. Elsewhere in Pac-12 play, Washington was able to outlast Stanford. Stanford has not had the greatest season, but Stanford came oh so close to knocking off Washington in the second matchup between the Huskies and the Cardinal. To the delight of Husky fans, they were able to outlast the Cardinal, and Washington surprisingly holds the top spot in the Pac-12 with 1 more week to go. I want to say Washington plays Cal this week. I'm not entirely certain. Let me check what's going on. But last I can definitely confirm that the whatchamacallit, Washington is on top in terms of the Pac-12 standings. Like, Washington is still all alone in first place. They are 15-3, while Oregon is 13-3. This is going to go by win percentage, which is dumb. I hate how the Pac-12 has to cancel series instead of, like, postponing them. And what I also hate is that they're not giving the Pac-12 a chance to, like, move out of their, let's say, bubble and, like, challenge opponents outside of their conference. Like, Utah would have loved to have challenged Wisconsin. Even if they had to go to Wisconsin, they would have killed to play Wisconsin and prove to everyone that they are still one of the top teams, not just in the Pac-12, but still the top team in the nation. That would have been a perfect scenario, but unfortunately, the Pac-12 isn't going to allow the Pac-12 teams to exit out of their region and challenge other schools. It's really dumb. And what I would have liked was, I would have liked to have seen Washington State and Oregon face one another, because I believe it was like week 5 or week 6 that Washington State's opponent and then Oregon's opponent canceled their matches, and then they could have faced one another and then ran it back for a non-conference game. I don't know the full scenario for the Pac-12 schools, but why can't the Pac-12 just let these schools just find matchups to, like, face other teams? Like, the West Coast Conference did it with Pepperdine and Baylor, who is in the Big 12. I know Baylor had a non-conference schedule when it came to this spring because they already completed their conference schedule in the fall, but I think most of these conferences should have given at least some little leeway to teams to, like, make sure they don't get rusty. Heck, last week I would have loved to have seen Wisconsin versus Washington, because I think both of those teams would have loved to have faced one another in that matchup. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and we have been cheated out of possibly a really, really good series. So there's that right there, and that's my little spiel on what's been happening. Now let's jump over to the Summit League. So the Summit League had probably the most interesting result this past weekend. So Kansas City faced Denver. Kansas City was 1 win away from clinching the Summit League regular season championship outright and clinching the number 1 seed in the Summit League tournament. However, they had to get past Denver. They did return to their humble abode in the Sweeney Recreational Center, but Denver was ready for them, as Denver managed to take the first set. Well, this was in the first match. Denver took the first set against Kansas City 25-17. The second set, Denver took the second set 25-13. Denver did not trail in any of the first 2 sets in the first matchup. The third set, Kansas City and Denver were tied 8 times, and then there were 4 lead changes, but Denver was able to take the third set 25-20, sweeping Kansas City, and that actually marked Kansas City's first loss at home, and it also marked the first time that Kansas City didn't go 5 sets, which, that's impressive by Denver. And the thing about Denver is that they didn't even have one player crack double digits in terms of kills in the first match. What really helped Denver was that they outserved Kansas City 9 service aces to 3. And they only missed 5 service errors compared to Kansas City's 8 missed serves. And as a team, Denver hit 280 while Kansas City hit 115. Honestly, I think Kansas City, I've seen this about Kansas City. They have a lot of talent, but their one problem is their height. Kansas City is a pretty short team. I don't think they have too many players that crack 6 feet. And their tallest player is like 6 feet 2, I want to say. And then Denver's tallest player has like players in like the 6 foot to like 6'3" range. The one thing I will say that Kansas City did well in was that they dug the ball well, as no player on Denver had double-digit digs, while Kansas City's Maddie Wren had 14 digs. Also, Kansas City did not block the ball well. They only had 2 blocks as a team. They had 1 solo block and then 2 block assists, while Denver had 20 block assists, which translates to 10 blocks as a team. And overall, it was just a one-sided match with Denver just dominating. This is a reminder, however, that Denver is the reigning Summit League Conference Tournament champion, or Summit League Tournament champion. Saying Summit League Conference is redundant. Anyway, as for the second match between Denver and Kansas City, this was more of the same, as Denver only trailed once, and that was in the first set, but that was it. And there was 2 ties in that first set, as Denver took the first set in the second match 25-16. The second set went to Denver 25-18, and then the third set went to Denver 25-17. Denver never trailed, and there were no ties in sets 2 and 3. That just goes to show you that Denver really had a great plan against Kansas City. I don't know if Kansas City was without a few of their players, but I'll also say this, I just don't think they were prepared. I think Denver was the dominant team. And here's the thing about Denver. Denver was in the situation where they had to win both of their matchups. They had to win. They couldn't split, otherwise they couldn't win the Summit League regular season championship. But here's the thing about Denver. Denver actually lost a matchup to South Dakota, which that actually really set them back a lot. And that actually jeopardized their chances of winning the Summit League regular season championship. So Denver surprisingly held Kansas City to no players having double digits in kills, and then also Kansas City had no players crack double digits in terms of digs as well. And then as a team, Kansas City only hit 106. Hard to win matches when your team is hitting 106. Especially in the first 2 sets, Kansas City had a hitting percentage of -75, and then they also had a hitting percentage of 111 in set 2. Shockingly enough, Kansas City had a hitting percentage of 357 in set 3, but that was certainly not enough, as Denver had a hitting percentage of 250 in set 1, 222 in set 2, and then 519 in set 3, where they only had 2 hitting errors, and Denver actually had a player crack double digits in kills, as that was courtesy of Lauren Poulter, who had 12 kills. There were actually 3 players that had 9 kills on Denver, so theoretically Denver could have had 4 players crack double digits in kills. Katrina Marinkovic, Lydia Bartolo, and Tina Bowe each had 9 kills. And they also hit over 260. Each player hit over 260, while Poulter hit 320. As a team, Denver hit 302. Denver had 6 service aces. 4 of them actually went to Bartolo. And Denver also had 7 blocks as a team compared to Kansas City's 3. Denver outdug Kansas City 50-36. They had 3 players, they only had 2 players crack double digits in digs. Macy Carabine had 14 digs, while Gianna Bartolo had 11. So this was just a domination by by Denver, as they won the regular season Summit League championship. A team I really feel bad for in the Summit League is South Dakota. Now, South Dakota was slated to face Denver a second time. However, I think it was like a couple weeks ago, I want to say. Yeah, 2 weeks ago, Denver and South Dakota had their series. South Dakota won the first matchup, but the second matchup was never played. Why? Not because of COVID, but because of the bad weather that was occurring in Denver. So both teams decided to call that a no contest, and South Dakota went home with one win. While Denver only had 2 losses at the time. They only lost to Omaha early in the season, and then they lost to Denver. And then after that, Denver had never lost again. So I really feel bad for South Dakota just because South Dakota beaten Denver, South Dakota, Denver, and Kansas City would have all been regular season league champions. But then the seeding would have been all over the place. It would have been difficult to determine which team was going to be the number 1 seed, which team was going to be the number 2 seed, and which team was going to be the number 3 seed. But the Summit League tournament has been finalized. Denver is the number 1 seed, Kansas City is the number 2 seed, South Dakota is the number 3 seed, and Omaha is the number 4 seed. If I'm going to be honest with you all, any of those 4 teams can win. It's only a 4-team tournament, which is shocking, but I guess that kind of weeds out some of the competition. They did this last year as well, so there's that. Heck, I even think Omaha can win the tournament, because Omaha has beaten South Dakota, Denver, and Kansas City once this season. It's quite shocking, but Denver isn't fully protected. I mean, they have probably the deepest roster of any of the Summit League teams for a team that was slated to finish second in the league. Kansas City has talent all over the board, but they lack in height. But they are still up there in terms of talent level, and they're up there in consistency. And then South Dakota is still not to be slept on. South Dakota is still probably the dominant team in the Summit League, even though they had a little bit of a dip against Kansas City. But Kansas City was on fire that going into that match. It's tough to slow down a Kansas City team that's known for battling back from a 2-1 deficit. The thing about Denver was that they did not fall into the trap of allowing Kansas City to be in a 2-1 deficit. They just put them in a 2-0 deficit, and then that was that. So Denver, I think, found the key to taking down Kansas City. Put them in a 2-0 deficit, put them on their heels, put pressure on them, and then just make them go bye-bye. But that doesn't mean Denver is out of the woods. Denver still has to face a scrappy Omaha team, which has a lot of grit and determination. The only thing I'll say about Omaha is, can they really take down a red-hot Denver team that's playing some of its best volleyball as of right now? I think they can, considering, again, they've beaten Denver earlier in the season, but Omaha also had a loss to South Dakota State, which that's not going to really sit well with anyone. But then again, South Dakota State did go 5 with Kansas City. A lot of opponents have had to go 5 with Kansas City. That's just the beauty of the Summit League. I think the Summit League is probably one of my most favorite non-Power 5 conferences this year. Not just because we have a Kansas City show dedicated. We have a show dedicated to Kansas City, but because Kansas City is a new team in that conference, and they're performing really well. So the fact that they beat South Dakota twice in one season is amazing. It's just that against Denver, they should have come a little bit more prepared, just because Denver is still the reigning conference champion or league champion. Either way, it's a new season for Kansas City, South Dakota, Denver, and Omaha. Anyone can win the tournament. It's just that no one can underestimate anybody. Otherwise, it could get a little messy. So the last bit of noteworthy information I want to go over before we head to a break is what happened in the West Coast Conference. So San Diego and Pepperdine faced one another in a series. The first matchup went to Pepperdine, but the second matchup actually went to San Diego. So I actually didn't print out notes regarding this match, but I'll say this: San Diego really showed up. They really showed up, and their seniors really stepped up against Pepperdine. I was surprised to see Pepperdine losing that second match. That's because Pepperdine has had a lot of consistency this year, and I think they're probably one of the best teams that's not in a Power 5 school. The only problem is that how many teams can the NCAA tournament take when it comes to like these non-Power 5 schools? Because I'll be going over this in a minute. I'll be going over the top 25 in a little bit. But I will also say this. Can Pepperdine have a deep run in the NCAA tournament this year? I think they can. Their problem is that they just lack seniors. They have a lot of firepower, that's for sure. But I think their seniors are definitely standoutish, as Shannon Scully leads the fray, but they also have good underclassmen such as Rachel Aherns, Madison Shields, Meg Brown, the list goes on. And then their setter is only a sophomore, so that's pretty cool as well. So, with Pepperdine losing to San Diego, Pepperdine is no longer in first place. They're now in second place as BYU beat St. Mary's in both of their matchups last weekend. So that means there's only one series remaining between Pepperdine and BYU. And surprisingly enough, BYU and Pepperdine face the same opponent. They face Santa Clara. The Cougars face Santa Clara on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the Waves face Santa Clara on Friday and Saturday. So it's going to be a busy week for Santa Clara. Oh, and by the way, BYU is playing Santa Clara in Provo, while Pepperdine is playing Santa Clara in Santa Clara. So there's that right there, and I'll be previewing those matchups in the second part of the show. So now, before we head to a commercial break, we gotta go over the top 25 in terms of the NCAA women's volleyball coaches polls, as well as the men's volleyball coaches polls. We'll actually start with the men just because I haven't gotten to them, and there were no real standout-ish matches that stood out to me last weekend. So the first matchup. Okay. So why did I say matchup? So the first NCAA Division I and II men's coaches poll results in 15 through 12. 15 is George Mason, 14 is UC Irvine, 13 is UC San Diego, and 12 is McKendree. 10 through 6, tied for number 10 is Loyola of Chicago and New Jersey Institute of Technology, or NJIT. Number 9 is Grand Canyon, number 8 is Penn State, number 7 is Long Beach State, and number 6 is UCLA. 5 through 1, number 5 is Lewis, number 4 is Pepperdine, number 3 is UC Santa Barbara, number 2 is BYU, and number 1, and you're still number 1 team in the AVCA men's coaches polls, is Hawaii. Now let's jump to the women's side of things. So the top 25 AVCA women's coaches polls. 25 through 21. 25 is Missouri. 24 is Rice. Hey, welcome to the top 25, Rice. 23 is Georgia Tech, 22 is Notre Dame, and then 21 is San Diego. 20 through 16, 20 is Pepperdine, 19 is Western Kentucky, 18 is Pitt, 17 is UCLA, and 16 is Oregon. 15 through 11, 15 is Washington State, 14 is BYU, 13 is Louisville, 12 is Utah, and 11 is Penn State. 10 through 6, 10 is Penn State, 9 is Baylor, Purdue is 8, woo! 7 is Washington, and then 6 is Florida. And then 5 through 1, number 5 is Texas, had a little bit of a dip there. 4 is Nebraska, 3 is Minnesota, 2 is Kentucky, and your still number 1 team in the AVCA Women's Volleyball Coaches Poll is Wisconsin. I'm surprised Baylor slipped that far down to number 9. I mean, it was one thing that Texas slipped down from number 2 all the way down to number 5, but it was another thing to see Baylor almost be left out of the top 10. But it's for good reason as well, considering Ohio State hasn't been fully challenged. Baylor has faced Texas 4 times, and then they beat Rice, which Rice beat Texas and whatnot. So that's kind of the rock, paper, scissors matchup. And then Minnesota and Nebraska are up to 3-4, while Wisconsin is still chilling at number 1. And then Kentucky is number 2, and this actually actually leads me to going into the automatic qualifiers. Then we'll take a break. So the teams that have automatically clinched a spot in the NCAA tournament. There are 30 automatic qualifier spots, and 6 teams have clinched an automatic qualifier in the NCAA tournament. Those teams are High Point, Texas, UNLV out of the Mountain West Conference, Kentucky, Jacksonville State out of the SWAC, and Texas State out of the Sun Belt Conference. So those are your 6 teams that have automatically qualified for the NCAA tournament, and we are looking forward to seeing those teams. 24 spots remain, and then we still have 18 at-large spots. Who will they go to? Find out in a little bit as we take ourselves a quick commercial break. As when we come back, we'll be talking about the up-and-coming matchups for this week, and I'll send you all on your way. So you're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Los Great, here to give you what you want, here to give you what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement with a crispy, awesome white tea. They're coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IU Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
We're back with part 2 of Set Point. You can check out all of our amazing shows on many numerous platforms, such as Spreaker, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, YouTube, Apple Podcast, Deezer, and like I said, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, if I haven't already said it. So definitely check. We are on many numerous platforms, including StreamYard. And you can check out all of our amazing shows, such as Let's Whine About Sports, which Mike Pat did an amazing job yesterday. You can check out my boy Marcus Losgreat, who's going to be doing Gloves Off this week at 8 p.m. Pacific Time, 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So definitely do check out my boy Marcus Losgreat. He just had a birthday, and he's one of the more top listeners when it comes to Set Point, and I really appreciate him. He and I are brothers, and he's given me good advice, and Set Point wouldn't be anywhere without him. And then also check out Bases Loaded, which is going to be on later tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on StreamYard. And then also later on today, we have Adam Carnick going live with Chi-Town Weekly. Adam was actually in the chat room, and he does his Chi-Town Weekly every Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern. But this week, he's going to be going live at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So definitely tune in to Mr. Adam Carnick. He does an amazing job with his show, and I'm certain he's going to be talking about a lot of March Madness that's been happening. So now let's jump to segment 2 of Set Point, and I actually need to get something off my chest a little. So I also forgot about the ACC. I've been yakking about the Big Ten and the Pac-12 so much that I forgot the ACC. So the ACC had some interesting matchups that happened last weekend. Pitt played Pitt played Florida State and North Carolina and won both those matches. Louisville played a match against Georgia Tech and then wound up winning that one handily in 3 sets. Which, that's no surprise right there. And then I want to say Louisville also played their matchup against NC State, which it wouldn't shock me if Louisville won that matchup as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna, Louisville did sweep NC State, and Louisville surprisingly is on top of the ACC standings, which. Again, that's really surprising. They're 9-2, which I kind of don't understand. Which I thought they had more wins than that. I know Virginia. Their game against Virginia is canceled, and that's going to be an automatic forfeit because Virginia basically canceled the rest of its season, which is understandable. But their game against Virginia Tech was also postponed as well. So I'm surprised. And then also their matchup against Notre Dame has still not been made up. And that matchup was postponed all the way back in September. And then it was supposed to be made up in February, which I was looking forward to. And then it got postponed because of COVID. So I'm just wondering if some of these matchups that got postponed are going to be made up, or are they just going to be canceled altogether? Because I was really looking forward to matchups such as Wisconsin versus Nebraska or Louisville versus Notre Dame. I know it's for the safety of the players, but I really, really would have wanted to see some of these matchups. It really would have been awesome. Just because I think it would have broken the ice in some of these conferences. I know we're in a pandemic year, but it would have definitely been helpful considering Louisville is 9-2, while Georgia Tech is 12-3, Pitt is 12-4, Notre Dame is 11-3. Notre Dame actually has a matchup against Georgia Tech this weekend. That could be helpful in terms of helping them climb up the ACC standings. The problem is for Notre Dame is that Louisville has a very favorable schedule as they play Miami and North Carolina. And Louisville is actually 10-2 in the ACC. the ACC website needs to update that. So Louisville plays Miami at Miami, and then they also play North Carolina in Miami as well. So I could see Louisville winning both those matchups. Miami has regressed drastically. North Carolina, okay, so North Carolina to me, I think is an interesting scenario. The problem is that North Carolina lost last weekend to Pitt and Florida State. The fact that they took Florida State to 5 sets was pretty amazing. But North Carolina is that interesting bubble team in the ACC. Like, North Carolina has that standout win over Notre Dame, but they don't have any other standout-ish wins. Like, they have a loss against East Carolina. They also lost to Clemson, which really hurt them. Their matchup against Georgia Tech got postponed, which that would have helped them had they won, considering Georgia Tech has been reeling ever since they got whomped by Pitt. But North Carolina cannot win the ACC. Let's get that out of the way. North Carolina could still maybe win still can maybe make the NCAA tournament. The problem is with North Carolina is that they're going to need to win against Louisville. If they beat Louisville, that helps their chance of making the NCAA tournament, and it also helps Georgia and Notre Dame's chances of winning the ACC. So that's why Louisville is in this interesting scenario where if Louisville runs the table, they're ACC champions. It's kind of like what happened with not Notre Dame, Oregon in men's basketball. Despite them having played fewer games than USC, Oregon was able to win out because of a higher win percentage. The same can be said for Washington in the Pac-12 in terms of women's volleyball, as well as Wisconsin, which hasn't even lost a match yet. But because everyone is beating themselves in the Big Ten, like Nebraska is beating Minnesota, and then everything else that's been happening, I think Wisconsin's most likely going to win that conference. My only thing is that Wisconsin hasn't really. They've had to postpone some of their series. Like they postponed their series against Northwestern due to a COVID outbreak in their program. They had to postpone their series against Michigan and Nebraska, and then their series against Penn State got canceled as well. So this week, I think Wisconsin played someone else. I think they played like Iowa or Indiana. Either way, they didn't. They play. It was one of those low tier teams in the Big Ten. So this week, Wisconsin plays Michigan. So yeah, this is a very dicey scenario that the NCAA's got going on. Like this is kind of where you maybe wish we could have. This is kind of where I wish the NCAA committee pushed back the I'm blanking on it. The NCAA tournament, and then just gave extended weeks to like everyone else that was unable to make up their games. I know this week is like the makeup week for some of these conferences, like the SEC and maybe like the ACC and whatnot, but I really would have liked to see more of these matchups played out, because I would have loved to see Nebraska and Wisconsin or any of those other matchups that I've named. I don't want to be a broken record or anything, but I've pretty much said what I've needed to say about I wish some of these matchups got made up, especially the Louisville-Notre Dame one. I was so looking forward to that one, and then it never came. It really never came, and sadly, it just never got made up, which, I mean, I know it was supposed to be made up in February, but the fact that things happened, unfortunately, we're just not going to be able to get, like, some of these matchups. It really sucks, but it's all good. Like, it's for the health and safety of, like, everybody. Like, I totally understand it, but I just hate the fact that we got cheated out of some of these very noteworthy matchups that could be groundbreaking in terms of the seedings of the NCAA tournament. So there's that right there. Speaking of NCAA women's volleyball matches that are groundbreaking, we have two series in the West Coast Conference West Coast Conference that could be groundbreaking. So we have Santa Clara at BYU and then Pepperdine at Santa Clara. So Santa Clara... Now, here's the story about Santa Clara. Santa Clara had to miss the first 3 weeks of the West Coast Conference due to the Santa Clara guidelines and COVID and whatnot. I don't think they had COVID, but they had to miss the first 3 weeks, which really sucked for them. Their first series of the season was against San Diego, which they did well against them. The problem is that San Diego came out on top, and that's kind of what happens when you face one of the top big sister teams in your conference. Like San Diego was raring to go, and they knew that they knew they needed not to underestimate Santa Clara, because Santa Clara has some stud players like Julia Sangiacomo and a few other players as well. So there's that right there. So here's the thing about BYU against Santa Clara. Santa Clara is going to have to go up to Provo to face the Cougars. I don't think BYU is guaranteed to win this match. Here's why. BYU is still pretty young, and they know that if they win both of these matchups, they're the conference champions. Like, even if Pepperdine wins their 2 matchups against Santa Clara, BYU is the automatic qualifier. But here's the thing for BYU. I think BYU needs to be really careful against Santa Clara. Santa Clara has a bunch of talented players such as Julia Sangiacomo, who leads the team in kills with 217. Sophie Tolino, who is a freshman on the team, also is second in kills with 184. Michelle Schaefer has 56 kills. Gretchen Reinert is a floor general when it comes to digs, as she has 191 digs. The thing about Santa Clara is that they lack seniors. They have a lot of underclassmen. They only have 2 seniors. I think one is coming back for like a redshirt year, while the other one is graduating, and that's Gretchen Reinert. But the thing about Santa Clara is that they have a bunch of studs. The problem is that they're young, and not everyone has fully played. Like Alex Anthony has played, and she has 59 kills, and she also excels in terms of blocks. She actually I think she leads the team in blocks with 49 overall, and whatnot. So, honestly, I think Santa Clara could, hence the word could, give BYU a tough matchup. And the thing about BYU is that BYU has to face Santa Clara first. Then Pepperdine has to face Santa Clara. I think BYU can win both their matchups, but it would not shock me in the slightest if Santa Clara actually burst BYU's chances of winning the West Coast Conference. Because something I've learned in the West Coast Conference is that nothing is guaranteed. Like, the best teams in the conference are even at risk of losing. Look at San Diego. They almost lost to Gonzaga, and then Pepperdine had to go 5 with Pacific. And some of these teams are like much better than what their record indicates. And just ask San Diego, which also lost to LMU, aka Loyola Marymount. Like, nothing is guaranteed, nothing is promised, and like, again, we're in a interesting year where some of these teams that most people didn't give enough credit for are actually rising to the occasion. The thing about the West Coast Conference is that I'm pretty sure they're only going to take BYU, San Diego, and Pepperdine. If not, they may even leave San Diego out of it, because San Diego has no matches this weekend. They've already concluded their season. This is actually the makeup week for the West Coast Conference. But if BYU wants to win the conference, they gotta win out. Like, if that happens, then the Pepperdine Santa Clara matchup is basically going to be for a final tune-up for Pepperdine. Because I can see Pepperdine having a deep NCAA tournament run. The problem for BYU is that they lack junior upperclassmen. They have 2 seniors and 2 juniors. So then they have plenty of sophomores and freshmen. So That's what I kind of fear when it comes to BYU going into the NCAA tournament. Can their underclassmen rise to the occasion? I say they can, but they will not. They won't have the deepest run in the tournament. Like, if they get out of the first round, that could be the biggest miracle for them. I'm not trying to say BYU is bad, but they lost a lot to graduation, and they have only four sophomores. They have, four seniors and juniors, 2 juniors and 2 seniors, and then the rest are like sophomores and freshmen. Same can be said for Pepperdine, except Pepperdine's underclassmen have been stepping up, such as Meg Brown and Madison Shields and Emma Ammerman. Like, the freshmen and sophomores stepping up is a promising sign for the Waves, especially if their program gets like better like signing classes this year. Like, I'm not trying to say their signing class from 2020 isn't good, but I'm just saying that if they continue to like develop their younger players, then Pepperdine could be ruling over the West Coast Conference for years to come. Like, next year looks really promising for the Waves, but it also looks promising for BYU as well. San Diego, I'm not so sure about, considering if San Diego wasn't able to win with their upperclassmen this year, then I don't know how they're going to win next year. So there's that right there. So now let's jump over to NCAA men's volleyball action, as we're going to get probably the matchup of the season. It's going to be between number 7 Long Beach State at number 1 Hawaii. These are the top 2 teams in the Big West Conference, and no team has had an answer for Hawaii. Not even UC Santa Barbara. So this is going to be a true matchup for Long Beach State. Long Beach State won both of its matchups against UC Irvine. They beat the Anteaters in 4 sets at the Pyramid, and then they also beat the Anteaters at the Bren Events Center in 5 sets. Like, the fact that they are able to beat... let me go through this one by one. So, the first matchup, Long Beach State lost the first set, and then they won the next 3 sets. The second matchup against UC Irvine won the first 2 sets, and then Long Beach State reverse swept UC Irvine, which I kind of figured that was going to happen just because UC Irvine has had a lot of inconsistency this year. But I'll also say this, I'm surprised UC Irvine got reverse swept on its home floor. Like, that's pretty disappointing if you're UC Irvine. Like, there's a reason why I'm not too high on UC Irvine. Not just because I'm a Long Beach State student, but just because, I don't know, like, UC Irvine is like, they have this good on paper team, and then they just wind up falling flat. Like, Long Beach always has that perennial team year in and year out. Like, they've really surprised me in their first 4 games of the season. Like, even in their loss against UC Santa Barbara. And shout out to Marcus Los Great for popping in the chat room. Thank you for joining me. And yes, you are my brother as well, Marcus. And happy belated birthday yet again. And I hope you had an amazing birthday. So there's that. So here's the thing for Hawaii. Hawaii is going to get a big challenge from Long Beach State. I would not be shocked if Long Beach won a match against Hawaii. I know Hawaii has a lot of talent, such as Rado Parapanov and Patrick Gassman, but Long Beach has proven to rise above the challenge. Like, the fact that they even knocked off UC Santa Barbara is quite astounding. I know UC Santa Barbara has had libero issues, but the Gauchos are still at number 3 in terms of the coaches' polls. I think everyone is underestimating Long Beach State just because Long Beach had a slower start to the season. Or, I'm sorry, not a slower start, a later start to the season, considering Long Beach did not get those non-conference games, which is absolute... It's not, I won't say absolute bologna sausage, but I'll also say this. It puts Long Beach at a slight disadvantage, but I don't think it's mattering too much, just because Long Beach has a whole lot of talent on that team. They have Shane Holdaway, Ethan Siegfried, Simone Anderson. Their new setter is Aiden Knipe, the son of Alan Knipe, the head coach. and he's done a great job. Mason Briggs has done a great job at libero, and they've also had other players stepping up in the middle blocker position. So honestly, I would not be shocked in the slightest if Long Beach State won. And I'm also going to say this. I think Long Beach State beats Hawaii in at least one of the matches. If Hawaii does win one of the matches, then I'm going to eat crow, and I'll be proud to eat crow. But I think Long Beach always gives Hawaii a tough matchup, whether they win or lose. Like in 2019, Long Beach and Hawaii in their regular season matchups went 5 sets. Long Beach won both those matches. And then in the Big West Conference Championship, Hawaii and Long Beach State went 5, and Hawaii wound up winning. And then in the NCAA Championship, Long Beach State beat Hawaii in 4 sets, as Long Beach State was the number 2 seed, as opposed to Hawaii being the number 1 seed. Which, that just goes to show you that Long Beach and Hawaii are basically the longtime rivals. They are the bitter rivals. The thing about Long Beach is that they're going to need to have good serve-receive. Like, if they don't do well in serve-receive, they're going to struggle immensely, because Hawaii has some big-time servers like Parapanov and Gassman and a few others. I think they have another guy named Chaz Lopez, I want to say. Either way, Hawaii is not to be underestimated, but neither is Long Beach. And I think this is going to be like the matchup of all matchups that end all matchups. Like Chaz Galloway, that's his name. And then also the setters always shuffle when it comes to like every match. Like Hawaii, and then their libero Gage Worsley does a great job when it comes to like digging the ball and when it comes to like digging, and it's absolutely amazing. I think Hawaii they're just a well-balanced team. They're a well-oiled machine, and it's tough to say anything negative about them. My only question I have to ask them is, how did they lose a set to UC San Diego? I get UC San Diego is a pretty solid team, but my problem is that how did they lose a set to them at Hawaii? I guess UC San Diego is just as good, which is pretty cool. Though I will also say this, that I think that losing that set really shows that the Big West Conference is loaded, and that even the best teams such as Hawaii can have trouble against a team like UC San Diego or UC Irvine or even Long Beach State. So we'll see. Unfortunately, I am unable to... Oh, here's the statistics. Duh. Okay, so looking at Hawaii's stats, they are obviously led by Rado Parapanov. He is the only player in triple digits when it comes to kills. Colton Cowell also has been excelling in digs. And then in terms of assists, that honor belongs to Jacob Thiel. Not Jacob Steele, Jacob Thiel. I sound like what's his face? The boxer, where he said, "I broke my back." Either way, yeah, it's Jacob Thiel. Either way, you all get what I mean. But if there's one thing I will question if there's one thing I'll fault about Hawaii, is that can they serve the ball perfectly? Because they have 97 service errors as opposed to 45 service aces. And not one player has cracked double digits in terms of aces. Now, I know you live by the jump serve, you die by the jump serve. But can they limit their service errors against Long Beach State? Long Beach State serves just as well as Hawaii. And the thing about Long Beach is they haven't beaten Hawaii at Stan Sheriff Center since 2018. So it's going to be a challenge for Long Beach State, but I have them at least winning 1 out of 2 matches against Hawaii. again, if I'm wrong, then I'll eat crow next week, and I'll be proud of it. But that's just my little spiel. And I think that's going to do it for today's episode of Set Point. I know it was a shorter episode. I didn't really have too many previews for this week just because there aren't really too many noteworthy matches. There is like conference tournaments happening right now, but like it would basically be just me talking about this matchup versus that matchup. As for the Summit League, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Denver wins the whole thing. I say Denver wins the Summit League championship. After seeing their dominance over Kansas City, I think the Pioneers are really good, and they probably have the deepest roster of the Summit League. And I think that South Dakota and Kansas City will be a tough matchup. I don't know. It's tough to beat a team 3 times in one season, so we'll have to see if Kansas City can pull that off. Omaha, I think, can give Denver a tough matchup, but I don't think Denver will be folding that easily. I think Denver's playing some high-level volleyball as of right now, and I think nothing's going to get in the way of Denver. Can Denver go far in the NCAA tournament? We'll have to see, but I'm not going to look too far into the top 16 and all that bracketology. I'm just going to take it 1 week at a time. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Set Point. Thank you to everyone that tuned in live. Thank you to everyone that is tuning in on the replay. Thank you to my brother Marcus Losgreat for popping in the chat room. I appreciate you. And thank you to Adam Karnick for popping in the chat room. I also appreciate you. Without any further delay, however, it is time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all for tuning into Set Point today and for this week. I'm not sure what next week is looking like. I want to say we'll be back to our original time, or our original day on Tuesday, but wherever I'm going to be at is when I'm going to be going live. Maybe I'll be live on Monday at like 5 p.m. Who knows? Like, we'll see what next week has in store for me. Like, nothing is set in stone and nothing is guaranteed. Just like everything that's happening in volleyball. On that note, for everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourselves a great rest of the afternoon. Enjoy the March Madness that's happening, the Elite 8. I'll be on the live call of Oregon State versus Houston on Wellington Sports Radio in less than 30 minutes. So that's where you can find me, and I'll see you then. But in terms of shows, I will see you Friday or Thursday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have a great night, everybody.